whatever.
All right, so we can call the meeting to order at 5. I'm not repeating this one.
You don't need to approve.
Minutes. All right, so the first, we do have 2 sets of meeting minutes. We have the March 26th meeting minutes. Anyone have any edits they need to make? And then we have the April 15th meeting minutes as well. Thank you, Jerry, that's very thorough, and that's a lot of fun. And I don't have enough. Okay. We can move on to grade IKA. So I guess we did have a discussion regarding it at the last board meeting. And I spent a lot of time kind of thinking about this for the last 2 weeks. And I even sort of wrote down like my own version of a chart that we have here in the draft for the IE 0.234, just to see if I can maybe understand it. Because one of what I sort of kind of came to was we are doing what we can to meet the kids where they are, and that's sort of the whole purpose of this. One thing that I don't feel that we're doing, and is being reiterated by the people who are coming to this meeting, is that we're not meeting the parents where they are, and that's where the disconnect is. So we really do need to work on just a way to sort of make it more accessible. I understand like that petition that went around and all of that, but as we've discussed previously, this is what we're trying to fix. So we do need to kind of meet the parents where they are and make it accessible for them. So I did not have an opportunity to send it out to everybody, but I did sort of make an expanded chart with that grading system that I can send to you guys. Unfortunately, I was sick this weekend. I didn't get a chance to send it out, but it sort of, maybe if we just sort of like expand it to, I talked about relative to expectations, and one of the things that I sort of expanded on there was, again, I'm ill prepared right now, is to kind of break down what the 1, 2, 3, 4 means in terms of expectations. So if a 4 is truly exceptional and considered far above the expectation, maybe we just make something that says that. The work is, for 3, I kind of have it as the work is good and it's better than the expectation. 2 is sufficient and it meets the most basic expectation. 1, the work is flawed in some way and does not meet the expectation. And then a 0 or an insufficient evidence is the work is significantly flawed and clearly short of the expectations. Does that sound accurate? In a very, very overarching sort of.
Well, and I don't know how much input this state still has on this, but their original guidance on it was that a 3 was proficient, and a 3 was basically meeting expectations, not a 2. So a 2 was approaching, a 3 was meeting, 4 was your exceptional.
I don't know if that's still the state's.
Right, I don't know if that's still their stance, but for as long as I can remember, that's.
It might have been mentioned, but it was never really dictated what the numbers actually represent. I don't recall the state ever saying that, you have to use this terminology. They never said. So that's why you have different grading scales all over the place when it comes to the state in general.
So the 1, 2, 3, 4 wasn't uniform from the state, so now every district not only can create their own competencies, which are vastly different for every content area, but now we can have our own.
It's the
That's
same.
even worse. It's even worse.
That's how it's always been. So the state's never really identified specifically what districts need to use as a requirement, which is what they tend to do for the majority of their ed rules, as well as any other guidelines that you get from the state. You leave it up for local decision. So to your question, Alice, I think that if you're looking for some parent-friendly language that would be helpful, looking at the grading scale, I don't think that would be enough for teachers to have conversations with students. So I think if we had like maybe a side-by-side parent-friendly language for what's being used specifically by teachers and communicating with students, it would be more detailed than what you have in front of you with the draft policy.
Okay, I know, so I read through the verbiage in that policy. I don't have a ton of issue with any of the verbiage in there. I think the thing that most people are going to be looking at, most of the thing that most people are looking for is simply that chart. And I truly think that what they're looking for is something along those lines of the reference point. Something that they can equate back to what they know, what they're thinking. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with the way it's spread out right now with a covering 4 and 3.5. I think that might be something that we can just work on a little bit, because it says that a D is a 2, and that it's the way that it's laid out right now that I know that so much work went into it, and I know you fought for that very, very hard.
Don't get me wrong though, it's not a hill I'm willing to die on. I'd be more than happy to remove that
Oh,
entire
I wasn't
section.
suggesting we remove it, I was suggesting we rework it.
There is really no comparison to a letter grade, 4-point scales. It was fun trying to communicate what that was going to be.
I think for the sake of, again, meeting the parents where they are, we may need to try.
That's fine. So some suggested wording would be good. You have it.
Yeah.
So I also did a lot of research into, just from my own, to some of the other districts and at the high school level. And interestingly enough, I don't even understand their grading system, which is a whole separate conversation when it comes to Guilford or Concord. And I'm actually, the problem I'm having is the lack of detail, which actually comes later. So that's where I'm struggling, because if you look at, say, Concord's, they have a grading scale and class rank, and they have this algorithm of combining assignments with decaying weights. And I was like, really? We're supposed to understand that? And this is in their, I'm just being honest, their program of study. So and then Guilford's, I had up on my screen, but they do a competency base and then they convert it. And I don't know how they convert the competency score to, there's lots of ways to do it, but I'm just trying to figure out how that happens, because there's not supposed to be a direct correlation or a direct cause and effect or equate, but that's what they're doing when they try to convert our scale to even it up. So I'm just, so oddly enough, which I did not think that this is where I would be, I'm leaning more towards general and making it specific to each school.
So
As
like in
opposed
the
to
student
trying, well, because like Guilford's policy and Concord's policy mirrors like IKA from the school boards, but then it says the grading policy at each school is approved by, or something like that, because I think we're trying to fix a problem across, I'm just telling you where I'm at, K to 12, and really I have a problem with the lack of details in some of this because it belongs somewhere else. So that's, I did do, like I said, a lot of research trying to figure out.
So if the Shaker Regional School District and say Inner Lakes School District, if both schools are running full-blown competencies with nothing else, in there, and Inner Lakes says that a a 3 is proficient. Belmont, or Shaker Regional says a 2 is proficient. How does that play out with moving through high school and then on to post-secondary?
The same way as if we were all on a 100-point scale and a 60 is passing for some and a 65 is passing for someone else. I'm not saying it's not an issue, I'm just saying even what I looked at now on the 100-point scale, you've got people that a 59 is an F, so a 60 is passing, and then you have other schools who have a much higher mark. And then some who go beyond, so their GPAs for high school is out of a 4.3. So it doesn't, so I'm just saying, I think we already have that across the entire state, whether we're on a 100-point or whether we're on 4-point competency based. I think we have that same issue.
So what you're going to see, Mark, is there's no consistency, right? If you're talking about comparing school districts, because at any point, school districts weren't required to be consistent across the state. And we've been left to really form our own grading and reporting practices. The other piece that is consistent, though, is when you talk to admissions counselors at higher ed, they're taking all of these different grading scales and they're doing their own conversions when it comes to admission and scholarships, because they know that there's not going to be a consistent grading scale that's going to come across in the transcript review.
I will say, I did do some research around that too, and my understanding, which I never even thought to ask this, but the high school's looking differently at the way they calculate their GPAs because the weighting of it is not consistent with some of the other schools in the area. So our GPAs at the high school level look lower because we don't weight it as much as some of the others. So I do think there's already work being done on that. So I feel like I don't have enough information to know what's going on at each school. So I'm just.
So then if we did sort of do it by school, obviously that would have to go in the student handbooks. Who would be doing that? Is that going to fall to the policy committee? Does that fall on?
No, the handbooks go directly to the board for review and approval in August.
Right, but if we're going to sort of outline by school what their grading looks like, how they're wording it, all of that, who does that? Who makes those updates to the student handbook? Is
The
that
principals.
The principals?
Mhm. So to your point, Michelle, about keeping IKA simple, the School Boards Association is the most common policy that's being utilized, and I did include that in the packet to see what that wording is.
I guess I should also clarify, if we used that, I don't think we as a board we as a policy committee should do a cop-out and not weigh in on the 100-point or the 4-point. I had given the go-ahead for you to fix it. I can't tell if anything is fixed because I don't know what's happening at the high school in particular, because that's where we heard most of it. So I want the down and dirty in terms of minimum number of assignments that could count towards predominance of the evidence. I want kind of how that all is taking place. How do you even convert it? Some other schools have tried to convert. I know no one wants to convert it. How do you deal with the GPA issue, which is an issue? And so that's but I'm not so that's where I'm at.
So 2 points at the high school level, you will see that they're working on wording that increases the weight for honors and AP courses.
Correct.
So that would help with the GPA.
Correct.
So they're weighting it. Other school districts do not weight at all. Districts have gotten away from weighting, even gotten away from valedictorian, salutatorian, and all of that.
Yes.
It's interesting, we're actually going to be weighting higher than we have in the past, as well passing for course credit is going to be a 2, and a 2 across all standards. In order to pass a course, where now it's 2.5, to help address the population of students that might be working really hard to accomplish that 2.5 pass for credit. And I talked with Mr. Finch the other day, and they're working on those grading expectations.
So when you say that, that we're going to a 2, so that decision has been made, or is that?
Again, it's a handbook decision that the board has to approve, so.
Okay.
I had concerns that we had too high of a failure rate, and the 2.5 was unattainable for.
Well, and that was one of
students.
the consequences that I had with multiple districts is in true competency fashion, there's no way to not have a higher failure rate. And I put that on the table very early on. Was that whole concern, was brushed under the rug, because it doesn't factor in, effort. It doesn't factor in, the work. But I also struggled with just making a blanket, lowering the bar to increase your passing rate. I personally don't think that's the solution either.
I think if we're talking about comparing districts, that's where I'm coming from specifically, because, you could skip across the town border, go coming in, go to Guilford, get a D minus and pass the class. So, we have kids that are in other school districts that are gaining course credits on a 100-point scale, which would be lower than what we're offering right now. So we're not looking to lower the bar, I'm just looking to make sure that the bar is attainable for a population of students that it's really tough to meet. You're going to see that in the handbook, Mark.
So, I'm happy to build it out, I just don't know how to build it out without diving deep.
I think before we can push this one to the board, we do need to build it out, honestly, because if pushing it to the board essentially says that it's got our stamp of approval, and right now it doesn't have mine.
Mm-hmm. That's fine.
So I think we do need to do that.
I don't have a bill. I'm happy to.
Can I ask what you mean when you say build it out?
Yeah, I put a clarification on that as well.
I don't know, you're talking about taking and writing what a 4 means, a 3 means, a 2. But
I
how
mean,
does
that's what I think we need in order for this to, and that's a big acceptance, but in order for this to make sense to a wider people.
Does that mean also how does it convert to a 100 point? Or I shouldn't even say that.
Right.
A, B, C, D.
I do think we need that too. I think that for me, being able to see that in the policy that you had given us this draft, that made it make a lot more sense for me. So I do think that that's important. Again, I think it's just, you have to meet people where they are. And obviously we have a ton of interest in these meetings, but it's a very small group of people considering the size of the district, So in order to make it make sense for the most amount of people, that's probably going to make the most sense.
You had said that, that we're not meeting the parents where they are. So the whole goal is to meet the students where they are. I don't necessarily feel that we're meeting the students where they are.
Can you elaborate?
With competencies. I mean, it's been well, and with the grading, it's been said, countless times where you take such a large swath of the student body, and they all get the same assessment, and so it takes all of the individualism of of an assignment, of an assessment, of a project, if you're doing project, based education. And it takes the drive, the desire to do well, to go above and beyond. It pushes it right off to the side. It takes the motivation.
Which is why I realize in competency there isn't necessarily a weighting, but I do think there's a difference with someone who's taking an honors class versus someone who's taking a non-honors class, so.
Right, but even within, what doesn't matter, I mean, we can talk about honors class or a non-honors class, even within that small microcosm of a single class. If you have 25 students in the in the class, and 18 of them are going to wind up with a single 3. You might have 2 or 3 that that wind up with 3, 5, or 4. One or 2 or 3 that wind up less than 3. It doesn't take long for students to basically look at it and say, okay, what's the lowest common denominator for me to be able to get to get that 3, because I'm going to be basically the same as 80% or 85% of my peers. And again, you can apply that to an honors level, you can apply that to a non-honors level. I mean, it really doesn't, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's where I think I said in the last meeting, where if we wanted to split this out to have more differentiation, which I know Ms. Piercy said you were not in support of that, but then that's leading us back to a 10-point 10-point scale anyway. So I'm stuck. But yeah, I'm in agreement. I mean, I think we need to play it out, in different scenarios before it's going to get any type of acceptance, and it still may not get acceptance. I don't know.
Well, so what are you proposing? For me to get on board with the competency grading with the 1, 2, 3, 4, I need to see more levels in between 2 and 3 and 4.
Are you suggesting that we go down to the 0.25 level, and kind of break that out?
At an absolute minimum, yes. I mean, I'm more inclined to see a 3-1, 3-2, 3-3.
Well, what's the difference between a 3-1 and a 3-2 and a 3-3? So is that what we come down?
Right, but so the difference there, and again, for people to have an understanding, well, what's the difference between an 82 and an 85 and an 87? It's a couple of, it's a couple of questions on an assessment. And that means that instead of having 80% of a body of students, whether it's class or entire grade, all at a 3, it's going to get broke out. It's you're going to have some students at a 3-1, some students at a 3-7, some students at a at a 2-7. It creates. Students are going to compare themselves to one another, no matter what we say, do. We want them to, we don't want them, we don't want them to. It's almost as if your grades are like the students' well, within the in the four walls of the school, and they're judging themselves, they're judging their peers, and when everybody is lumped together, again, it takes that motivation away.
Well, I don't support doing 3-1, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, then we might as well just, because it's supposed to be, I understand where you're coming from. I'm just telling you why I don't support that is that's really not how a competency-based grading scale is supposed to work. So then it's just taking that away because it's not supposed to be about the number of problems you get right. It's supposed to be about the predominance of the evidence. I get what you're saying. I just, that's crazy. That for me, that would be how to help our teachers understand what's a 3.1, a 3.2, a 3.3, a 3.4, a 3.5, or 2.2. I don't know.
Well, and I struggle with that because if that, if a decision was made to, to do that, then I would question then, well, why when we have, when you have a Carnegie-based system that already does it, so that's where I'm stuck. I don't see any good answers.
So when you say build it out, what did you mean? More detail.
Essentially, more detailed, but there's a lot of academic language in our current descriptions, which is wonderful, but it doesn't necessarily make it super easy for someone who is not in an education-based discipline to understand. So, because honestly, I can sit here and I can read that description and I can go, okay, but what does that mean? Is my kid meeting the expectation? Is my kid doing better than the expectation?
Right.
So, not being in an education-based discipline, to make it a little bit more accessible, I guess, is what I'd like to do.
Do you have ideas on how to make it more accessible?
Just, I think if the committee is looking to tweak this draft policy, we'll share the document with you and have at it. You build it out, bring it back to the committee, see what the committee thinks.
Okay.
That's the only way to do it.
That's fine. I can work on that too.
I would love to see if we could all maybe work on one of that and kind of brainstorm that way for our next meeting.
Yeah. So if we can-
Just trying to work that out.
So would we divvy up sections or how? I mean, if each one of us tackles the whole thing, that's a daunting task for everybody.
How would you like to do that?
I don't know. I wanted to put a word of caution because if all of us are trying to we're all trying to solve the exact same problem but not addressing some other ones. I mean there's going to be if we give it up, we have to understand that there's going to be a lot of debugging when someone presents because there will be questions back and hopefully nobody takes offense if someone starts questioning. I mean, I think we got to put that.
No, I haven't.
Again, we got to put that right on the right on the table.
We would.
Well, because we're all looking at this from a different
absolutely.
Which is kind of why I think it might, and I understand that it is a daunting task, but I kind of think that maybe we need everybody's perspective to kind of come to that. I mean,
Okay.
Do we have access to Silas?
I'm just trying to think of your process here because you share a document, start working on a document as a subcommittee of the board. The majority of this should be done in public.
Yeah, we have to do it in person unless we're doing it
Yeah,
simply.
I mean, if you're gonna have a work
I mean,
session. So I'm just thinking, going back to what you were saying, Alice, about having parent-friendly language. I think if you're going to put that in a policy, you put it in a policy, you've already come up with some language, present the language. I can tell you that that's not the specific grading scale that teachers would be using, okay? So if you're looking.
think it was.
No, so what you have in front of you for this draft policy is what the teachers will be using, particularly it's what their proficiency scales are based off of. It's what they're currently using and receiving professional development towards. If you're looking for the policy to be more parent-friendly and go in the handbook, then I would just start with that. Instead of trying to retweak this entire policy. So, I'm just telling the committee that what you have in front of you is draft policy. We stay to the 4-point scale. This is what teachers are going to be looking in order to grade. But I see your point about having parent-friendly language. So I think instead of making the situation complex around policy, more parent-friendly language in there as front of the policy. Just put it in there.
But you're suggesting, I hear what you're saying, Michael, but you're suggesting that this language doesn't resonate. So, yes, like title, transfer, efficient with distinction on the grades 5 through 12, which I can understand what that means. But again, it's a very academic based. Good because I don't. The student independently extends and transfers.
Right. I mean, a million years ago when everybody was using Danielson, it was, in some ways, it was very rigid. It was, you had goals and you had objectives, and everything had to be measurable. And that was something that I got really good at, or excelled at when I was, writing curriculum. And it's something that has always stuck with me, because if it's not measurable, then I haven't. And so it could be a mistake that I'm trying to apply some of, an outdated example. But again, I look at the description, and again with 512, and you just read it, Michelle. Independently extends and transfers sophisticated concepts and skills to authentic, novel context. How is that measurable? How is it being measured? And to your point, Alice, when a parent reads that, a parent's going to look at that and say, well, what does that mean?
Well, it would depend on what standard. Right, but
Right, yeah. And I guess this is where, I'm sure it's not a problem for us to solve here, but the fact that every district in the state can have a different set of competencies for every content area, is ridiculous in itself. And then I didn't realize until tonight that the districts can set their own their own proficiency level. I was always under the assumption that the state of New Hampshire, was that the target was always a 3. At least that's what we pounded into our heads. In multiple districts, is everybody shoot for a 3, shoot for a 3, shoot for a 3, because that's proficient. If individual districts can start, moving that all around, that's a whole other problem in itself.
If you look at the scale on the 5 through 12, particularly the depth of knowledge column, that's where it sort of simplifies.
using knowledge.
Using knowledge. So, if you have a student a list of vocabulary words, have them define those vocabulary words, but then use it in a way that, they might be applicable to a real life situation, like writing a paragraph. Use it as vocab words as a communication tool for media. That's using the knowledge gain.
But see, you just use a whole lot more words than what's written in this book of knowledge. So
Well, that's why I'm saying the depth of knowledge just sort of summarizes, simplifies what the description is in general.
then maybe some examples of, and this wouldn't go into the policy, but I mean, I would, for my own children, want to see how they're using that knowledge, how they're analyzing that knowledge, what makes it that particular. So just, having the using knowledge, analyzing knowledge, it doesn't necessarily tell me exactly what I want to know about that grade, I guess.
Yeah, and those details are in the proficiency scales that teachers use to grade those assignments, and those proficiency scales need to be accessible to parents.
Right.
We have teachers that do provide them, we have teachers that don't provide them to parents. So one of the things that we're looking at specifically in using Alma for grading and reporting is being able to attach those proficiency scales directly to the assignment. So a parent can click on the assignment, see the proficiency scale, and see the descriptor for what 4, 3, and so forth. It's just not easily accessible right now to parents, which is what Alma is going to change for us.
And I think
That'll make a big difference.
has been part of the problem. A lot of the information isn't fully accessible. So, did you say that you are prepared to work independently on some of that?
I certainly can. I was asking if, for me, the details that are missing are the things that would go in the handbook. So I can't tell if we're on the same page about what's missing in order for me to. But yes, I'm happy to. I don't really. I'm not an educator by training, so I mean, using knowledge, I can. Yes, I'm happy to do whatever. I don't know. Most of the policies out there, as previously described, refer back to more the general IKA, so we don't even really have any people to look at.
Because that is the common, that is what's consistent across the state, is that you see this policy, IKA, is that school board association, because the different grading scales and systems are outlined in handbooks, not in policy. I don't know what the initial intent of putting the grading scale on policy back in 2015 was. There it is.
So I overall would be fine going back to what the school board's policy has, as long as my concern has to do with the devil's in the details. And so getting it in August, which we have no, as a policy committee, we have no
Policy meeting.
well, we're not involved with that at all. So it would just come directly to the board right before school's supposed to start. So that's where I get stuck.
So if what's being presented for current version of IKA, if it does not come out of policy committee,
We have the old IKA, which is still 1 to 4.
yep. And then so we'll just, we live off of that.
Correct. And so we would still get, in August, the handbooks based on the old IKA, so things just stay the same. That's what happens.
You can get handbooks that would have more of this detail.
Right, but I'm saying based on the current IKA. So that's what we come out. I mean, we can keep working on this to get it to like what you were talking about while we move along with handbooks and all of that too. I mean, I'm just throwing stuff out, seeing what sticks. Well, is that what we want to do then? We can start working on that.
Okay.
Let's define what we're working on.
Right.
Yeah.
So everybody tackles everything that's important to them, and then we bring it back to the table, or?
Everything that's important to them. Share more
I
about
was
what
gonna
you
say, that's
mean.
very broad.
I'm like,
Elaborate for me.
Well, I mean, say someone, I would say a hot topic, issue for them would be class rank. So how is IKA going to play out, with class rank? Now, I know that, you had stated that, when you said that districts, are you talking local districts, state districts, or national districts doing away with valedictorian, salutatorian?
All three, actually. Depends on where they are along the continuum of
like
competency-based education. I mean,
Bo doesn't do, I just read in their handbook this morning, they don't rank.
So if that's important to somebody, and I would guess, what's the I guess the decision is, do we keep class rank? Do we not keep class rank? If we keep it, how does that play out with IKA? I mean, that's how, I guess, how I'm envisioning when you say build it out, or am I looking at it incorrectly?
I think you're going down a rabbit hole, quite honestly. If to tackle something as big as class rank is not in the purview of policy IKA. It doesn't discuss class rank. And if you're talking about potentially changing what that looks like, class rank, you have a few people here right now.
Right, but the
we
grading
have to get back
policy,
into the cafeteria for that
Right.
meeting.
but IKA would affect something like class rank. And again, I'm just using an example.
That's all math. Whether you're a 4-point scale or 100-point scale, it's a calculation. It's just math.
So I think what I meant when I said we can kind of build it out is I was looking specifically at this grading scale that we have in this draft policy. I think we can kind of narrow our focus to that and build that out in such a way that it makes sense to parents, to students, to anybody who looks at this and they can say, that's a grading scale right there. And it does that right now, but it in such a way that, again, I'm going to use the word accessible, that it's accessible to more people that way.
So I'm going to make a suggestion. I think because if the three of you start trying to work on this, it's going to get messy. I'm not just saying that because I don't have faith in the fact that you guys are going to get your points across, but the document will get really messy. I'm thinking off. I like the idea, Alice, if you put together using the scale, parent-friendly wording that goes into a policy, by all means, I think that's what we should work on, present that to the policy committee and take it from there. And then the principals will be working on the handbooks to get to you. I can tell you that they're going to be using this draft policy for their handbooks.
Okay.
In order to put those together, because this is what all of our proficiency scales and all of our graded reporting is based off of. And there's very little time between now and this school year.
All right, so then what I
Particularly
will
summer
do
months coming around.
is I will go ahead and I will continue working on it, because I have already sort of started, just because I am a very visual person, so actually seeing it sort of laid out helps me. I have started on something, so I will just continue on that. I am very happy to take notes from people, shoot me an email, and I can go ahead and Would you share with us what you put together? Or- Sure. Just because I'll have to actually look this up.
So the
So I'll have to do that
task,
later.
if I typed it up correctly, so the suggested task is the current, or what is the proposed grading scale making sense to students, parents, teachers, etc. Did I boil it down correctly?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's that. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's what I heard her say, yes. So then, I guess we table this for now. Yes. That means that we move on to EBCC, which is in the event of bomb, active shooter, and other such threats. Obviously, there's a lot of changes on this one. What I was tasked with, the last time this came up was, when we took it to the board had indicated that it felt like two very separate policies, and combining it in such a way that it read as one policy, so.
I think you did a great
I
job.
think you did a fantastic job.
I know you had some questions in blue, specifically for me. One of the things that we would not put in policy is how we actually specifically address the drills
Okay.
and the threats. Because that's the only people that have that information is Homeland Security.
Mhm.
So,
That's what I got the information from.
yeah. But they have our specific plans.
Okay.
So you don't put that in policy because it's not something you put out in public. I think it's great. I had Kim format what you provided to me, our current formatting of our policies.
I thought it was great.
I have no concerns with that.
So I'll move that to the full board for first reading.
Yes. And then we have JLCF. Michelle, I know you're on the wellness committee, which you might kind of. I'm not on the wellness committee.
Debbie's here specifically.
Yes,
Takes
because,
1 to 3 minutes,
Jill
but
is.
also
I was replaced by Jill.
these suggestions came out of the committee, so to see that there's strike-throughs and then there's some new wording that's in bold and italicized, and that's based on goals that were set by the committee.
And the committee has to do a review of the wellness policy and do a triennium report, which was presented to the board a couple of months ago. And then we have to develop new goals. So these were the goals that the committee came up with.
Debbie, one question I had is, the School Boards Association document was really long. Do we have all the required elements?
This is the policy that was accepted by the state when they did our audit. And she did note that the school board policy is really long. You don't need all that extra stuff.
I just think that's, because I had some questions about that as well. The New Hampshire School Boards Association policy is very long, and it actually specifically calls out things like record keeping, which when I went to go and look on the SAU 80 website, the only information that I could find about the wellness committee was the little blurb that you have out there, and then the meeting minutes from February 22nd. I don't see a school health index or district the policy assessments or anything like that. I did not find that on the website.
So the assessment report, the triennium assessment report, I thought, I'll make sure Kim puts it out there. But in the procedures, they didn't require us to have all that stuff in the policy. We have some of the procedures. We're required to keep record keeping, and I have the records.
In the New Hampshire School Boards Association policy, it says that they have to be made available to the public though. So, I think that either we should link them to this policy or they should be available in that wellness committee sub tab on the website or something like that.
moving that to the full board, first reading.
Some of those even go all the time. That's logic.
So just as Debbie mentioned, this was last amended in 2020. That's when we had our audit, specifically looking at the policy and those amendments that were made in 2020 were what were required to include in the policy.
And then it was, didn't the wellness committee didn't have to meet?
It was suspended during COVID, yeah.
So that's why some of those things aren't, I'm guessing, previous minutes.
Right.
I think the one question I had is, let's see, line 27 on page 2, which is Shaker Regional School District will explore ways to increase student participation in co-curricular activities. Like, how's that going to happen? What are you, in procedures, are you spelling out like the action plan for some of these things?
We weren't spelling out an action plan that I know of. This was something that a couple of the wellness committee members recommended. They had actually put targeted goals like, a 3% increase in year 1, and
Yeah.
And that didn't make sense to put those kinds of targets into a goal or into a policy. So we don't have action plans, but we can leave it up to the schools and the principals. And in the procedures, each school is supposed to have their own wellness committee as well, so they can look at ways to do that.
I having been on the committee when it first
Yep.
reconvened, when we were looking at, okay, did we do this one, did we not do this one? It'll be different because they're going to meet 3 times a year to look at progress, but
Right.
there's got to be something, otherwise people don't know what they're working on. That's just my thought. Not that that's directed at you, but the committee needs to.
Would it be possible to attach, like the school health index or the most recent triennial progress assessment, things like that to it, just so that they're available?
On the website?
Yeah.
Or
Oh,
attach it
absolutely.
to the policy or anything like that? Because you know how we do, like the rules and procedures, we can have that a link right next to it. Is there a way to add those?
I suppose
If not,
there is,
as long
but
as it's.
if the triennial report's on the website, then it would be accessible.
And potentially link the policy, could link it to the wellness policy section of the website.
Yeah.
We're reading the policy and
I did a whole lot of like jumping around on the website to try and find certain things as I was going through this policy to make sure that we were, kind of covering everything that we needed to, and it wasn't all there, so if we can make sure that it is.
And then is there procedures currently for this? Is it, I should know this, but is it on the website right now?
Yep.
Under policies. I'm fine as long as the procedures are updated to be whatever has to be included there.
so move the full board.
I think that was it.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Open up. The doors are locked. I have to go open the doors.
All right. So we're adjourned into 5 minutes.